Welcome. You are now listening to or watching the Shift Training Podcast,
where we talk about personal development, we talk about mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health, and just overall well-being.
And today we'll be doing another book review. Again, if you're not familiar with our book reviews, you can check us out on YouTube. We probably still have a few on Instagram. You just might have to scroll a little bit and look for it. But that's why we're getting back to book reviews, so we can give our 2 cents on some of these gems that we've gone through. And today's book review is going to be Never Finished by the great sensei, David Goggins. This man is the embodiment of discipline. For those who are not familiar, actually, this physical copy of the book, this is Vaughn's copy.
That's fine.
So I'm gonna pass that to Vaughn. But if you're not familiar with David Goggins, his previous book, his first book that came out is Can't Hurt Me. Okay, New York Times bestseller, all that jazz. Amazing book, but Can't Hurt Me, David Goggins. But the one we're reviewing today is Never Finished by David Goggins. Vaughn's got that physical copy.
That's right. And this is very similar to what we reviewed from the previous video about the 75 Hard.
Mm-hmm.
Very similar. Especially this Can't Hurt Me, as you mentioned earlier. If 75 hard is really hard, this one's going to be extremely difficult because it's going to be 365 hard.
Yeah, basically. So just to clarify, there's no challenge presented in this book. Okay, so the idea or concept of never finished actually is all about how we are never finished with the process of our development.
That's right.
It never ends. So some people might not really understand, so let me clarify a little bit on this. Let's say, why would Shift be reviewing, David Goggins' book? First off, for those who don't really understand David Goggins or what it's about, one, you should jump into his content. Two, learn a little bit more about emotional intelligence, emotional resilience, other things like that, and you'll come to realize that this man is on a super high level of awareness and executing at a crazy level, utilizing that and tapping further and deeper in that awareness, in that self-management, going further and further than most people ever, period. And he's doing it, and all it is kind of inspiration. It's showing us that usually when we think we're done, we're only at 40% in the tank. We usually have so much more, and that's kind of what this book says. The process is never finished.
That's right. I think for me, the biggest takeaway in this book is it's all about discipline, right? So this book, as you mentioned earlier, is the embodiment of discipline. And discipline does not have to be if you're in the Navy SEALs or whatever. Self-discipline is the most important part in your life in order for you to succeed. Self-discipline makes you become more accountable for yourself. When you say something that you're going to do it, then you must do it. And it starts from there. It doesn't have to be big. It could be something small. So those small things that you promise to yourself, it will compound, and throughout the years, you'll become the new standard of your own better version of yourself.
I think that something else that's mentioned in this book. So I think those are common examples of discipline that most people can relate to because they're physical examples, right? Yeah. It's like, I will do this with my body and my, I will do the things. And I think that's one form of discipline, and that's definitely the obvious. David Goggins talks about that. But in the book, the version of the book that I have is the audiobook, which I like because there's extra little gems, little podcast snippets and things like that he has recorded. So first off, let's talk about the book. The book has photos in it. We're going to talk about different chapters, different sections. Vaughn can cover some of that. But what I like about the way that the book flows, the audiobook, is that there is the chapter material, right? So you have whatever is going on. And then you have a little podcast basically interviewing David Goggins about that previous content. Then we go into the next part and then another podcast episode, and it keeps going, contents like that. So it's basically getting the author's, not only the author's story or them telling the story and what the lesson was, but also getting their personal 2 cents. The hearing the author talk about the situation, I think is one of the greatest gems. So first off, I recommend the audiobook. If you're already in audiobooks, you're probably going to choose that anyway. But even if you're used to reading physical books, I still recommend the audiobook because there's some additional content, some nuance. Yeah. And one of the things that he touches base on is not just being disciplined in our physical actions and things like that, right? But being disciplined with our emotions. And I think a great example of being disciplined, we talk about this often, is, choosing a response versus reaction. Creating greater space between stimulus and our response, right? The Viktor Frankl thing, right? Yeah. I think to do that, to pace yourself in your breath, to be more mindful of your feelings. What are you feeling, and how you're going to express, how you're going to emote, what emotion is going to surface or be displayed.
Yeah.
I think that is a great example of discipline, emotional discipline, which is what he talks about in the book a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's interesting about that emotional, that there's a space, when you, between a stimulus and a response, there's a space, and I think for most people, they perceive him as the person who's like sadistic or like,
Or like suppresses his emotions or suppresses his feelings. But no, he dives into them. He goes hard, and he goes into them, he experiences them, and then he goes, now what?
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the things that I always say is that you cannot be wallowing on your misery or you're from the past, because what happens on that is you get stuck there. Instead of just keep moving forward, look for the future. How can you get better? And you can use all the painful past that you have as a motivation, as a fire for you to keep going. When you're in that bottom, when you think about those things that happen to you, then it gives you that fire. You don't want to be in that situation again, but you want to overcome that.
I think one of the things to note also about that in his story, at least as it's told, right? Yeah. He basically said that he was feeling sorry for himself. Basically dwelling in the pity, dwelling in the negative circumstance, living in kind of like victimhood, honestly, but doing that and not really processing what he needed to process, from the time of being a kid all the way till he was like 24 or so, when he wanted to seek out, and I believe it's 24, I could be wrong, but basically right before he got ready, right when he was about to join the military. And that's when he started cultivating that, when he started trying to test it, trying to find out who he was, trying to dig deeper. Yeah. That started with his going to the military. And even beyond then, there's always moments where he has a clear differentiation between David might want to stop and feel sorry or bad for himself or whatever it may be, but Goggins, the savage, will show up and say, is this where you're really going to stop? We have to go further. There's more. And anytime he goes further or passes through a certain threshold or limit, more gems from his past, more trauma, more certain things come up, certain memories come up, and he'll use that. He'll gain something from it, and that's why he goes further. He keeps going to keep digging, mining, harvesting the gems and the gold within himself. Yeah. And I think that's important to note. It's like, so what's that? 8 to 24? What's that? 16 years. Yeah. So for 16 years, kind of just coasting, feeling bad for himself. He has every reason. He came from a very, very traumatic childhood. No cap. Yeah. It's very serious stuff. But sat in it and, said he was extremely overweight. Let's see if it's in this book. So you can't really tell in this, we'll see in the video. But basically in the shadow of the Can't Hurt Me is the much larger form of himself, will weigh a few hundred pounds. And then David Goggins in his military uniform, and you can see the difference in his transformation when he started to go, I can't live like this. I need to make something of myself. I have to do something with this. I can't just sit here in the pity forever.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest compliment that you will ever get from somebody. If they say that you're a savage, that means you're relentless. You're unstoppable. No one can stop you. If you fall down, they know that you'll get back up and never give up.
That's right. Another one of my favorite parts from Never Finished. Now, this one, again, for me, the value is seeing that you can continue to challenge yourself well beyond what you think is possible. And if you go all the way up to what you think is possible and just take a step further, it moves the door so much further away and your perspective widens a bunch. I love that. But what I actually really enjoy are some of the stories, like I said, in the podcast components. Some of the stories that he tells are just funny, because it's funny just to hear the way David Goggins talks. And when he switches from David to Goggins, just to hear the way that he talks, I just find very relatable and entertaining.
Yeah, I think that's interesting that when it's Goggins, it's turned on. And when it's David, it's the more compassionate side, very loose. And you said about when you were talking about this, the one that comes to mind when he talks about the book is that for most people, they just do things that is required, right? Mm-hmm. But for him,
the minimum.
Yeah, don't just do the minimum. Go exceed that.
He's going for the maximum.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. Maximum all the time, all day. maximize your growth.
100%. And another thing is that he is aware of the price he's going to pay.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important part about having awareness is not aimlessly going for the max, but also knowing that there's a price you're going to pay and being like, okay, I'm willing to pay that. Like he says, Roger that. And then we go.
Yeah, exactly. Now he's spending a whole lot more time with, how he was very extreme with maximizing his body, and now he's a little bit mellow. He does stretching for about an hour or 2 hours.
Prep now, but it's still just so he can get after it. That's really why. If he didn't have to do that to get after it, I don't know if he would do it.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that's how a lot of us learn. That's another thing that's relatable. He talks about having learning disabilities and it being hard for him to learn everything. Everything, he says, has been hard for him to learn to do. But I think that's how most people learn. It's sometimes we don't go to a place until it's required, but sometimes you won't find out what's required until you really push further. You won't end up in that place sometimes until it's too late. I feel like if you push towards max, it's weird. It's like there's like a little relationship or slider, I think. So if you run towards max, you'll get to max and you'll find out what's required of you sooner than later, meaning you'll have more time to start fighting for, practicing, getting ready for what's required of you, and you'll be more prepared for it versus what's required of you coming to find you, and you've been hiding, you've been running, you've been avoiding it, you've been not preparing for it, and it comes and finds you, and then you're overwhelmed, and now you don't know what to do because you never wanted to go towards it anyways. It still found you. Because I think the process of our development or cultivation, the expansion of our being, it still has to happen. So we can our sense of control is like, we can try to be assertive about it and try to make it happen on our time and get ready, or we can have it come find us and not be ready and be overwhelmed.
That's why I think that preparation is really important, so when that challenges comes in, you're prepared.
Right, and I think the only way you really get the most prepared time is to actually go seeking, to go look, to go look for the challenges, to go look for how can you go further.
Yeah, I think we have to look for that every single day. It doesn't have to be like really maximizing the things. Anything that it's comfortable. Just find the limit and then try to go a little bit past it. Just one step, or try to push the door open that you thought was sealed shut. Right, and just create a new baseline each day. 100%. I think that's it for me for Never Finished. Amazing book. One of my favorites from 2022 and 2023. 2023 just started, but honestly, it's still up there. So, Vaughn, anything else for them regarding this book? No, that's it. I think if you want to read this book, he has a good analogy about himself. There's this experiment he mentioned. He used it as an analogy or metaphorically. He's saying that he's this one rat out of from the experiment. From the experiment, there's a couple rats inside the experiment, and this is a bad experience, but I'll tell about the hope thing. So there's basically a study, and the short of it is there were some rats, and it was rats are normally good swimmers, but basically there was a difference between the rats that were kind of super coddled and they didn't really have the chance to do anything, and they put them in the thing for water and they kind of just left them there to kind of suffer, and then the rats drowned. But rats are naturally good swimmers, and they drowned in a really short time. It's really bad. But the ones where they let them be in the water for a little bit, and right when they hit the edge, they pulled them out, they warmed them up, gave them something, they took care of them, and they put them back in the water, and then they let them swim. Those rats swam much longer. They swam forever. So I think going to the edge and then coming out, having that recovery moment, having that whatever it is, and then going back in, then you start to realize, I can do this forever. So hope will, one, say, there's the possibility that I can keep going, but you still have to keep doing the work to prove that hope is valid. Yeah, I mean, that's what I remember when you talk about how maximizing it, and then as long as you know that there is a chance that you will succeed in this, even if you fail in that side. I think that's a good example of the scientists pulling them out and then putting them back again, and then they stayed for a long period of hours just swimming. And Goggins said too, you can't just hope. What he said is that you have to believe, because hope is not enough. Yeah,
and the thing that builds
believe it.
and the thing that's going to help you build belief is action.
Yeah,
100%. Cool.
that's it.
All right, well.
All right, don't forget to follow us on our social media, Shift on Your Life, and don't forget to subscribe on our YouTube and podcast, Shift Training. And I'll see you guys in the next video.
All right. Thank you guys. Have a great one.
Peace.